Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. I am late for my show. I figured I'd go ahead and do the show instead of just canceling it. And this is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. It is 6:20 in the morning here, Calgary, Alberta, Monday morning, July the 26th. And we've got about 6 minutes left of this show. But what I'm going to do is just continue talking, and it will show up on the archive. So if anybody would like to tune in for that, just keep listening, and after the show is actually over live, I'll just continue to keep talking because there's only about 6 minutes live left for the show. So yeah, I missed my alarms. I set 3 alarms and I actually slept through all of them. So that's terrible. But once in a while it does happen. Usually doesn't happen on my Monday to Friday shows because normally I'm up at quite early, but sometimes I've been known to miss my weekend shows. But yeah, sorry about that. I'm glad to be able to do these shows, glad to be able to continue on to do these shows. I wanted to talk today about something that I know very little about. I probably know more than I think, codependency, but I don't know a whole lot about the actual, the terms and what it is all about. So I wanted to take a look at that because I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and we were talking about codependency, and I think, I recognize it, and I recognize, what happens and why people are codependent. But I thought, well, it'd be a good idea to actually take a look at it in this week, and I actually found quite a lot of information on it. So I wanted to look at it because I do, I believe that a lot of people sort of have these codependency type issues, and there's ways to work around it. There's an article that I found called Codependency and Recovery. There's what is codependency, just all kinds of good stuff. So I thought that's what we would do. That's what I would do this week, is actually just talk about codependency and all that good stuff that goes with it. Be a learning experience for me because I'm just have never really studied up on codependency, but I know that within my family there was definitely codependent behaviors. And so that's what I thought we'd take a look at here this morning. We finished up that article last week from the ASCA.org.au, Adults Surviving Child Abuse, and in Australia. And I really like that website. Lots of good information on there. And I hope that, everybody will go and actually check that out. That's www.asca.org.au. And now I wanted to look at codependency and narcissism, and there's a website that we can actually take a test. It says here, Winning Team's Codependency Test. And it says, are you codependent? And then you have to answer these 10 questions, and then you can take a test and actually see if we actually are, right? And then there's another website that it's called Recovery World Codependency. And it talks about this section of it regarding child abuse and codependency, right? And so, and that one, I think maybe we'll just start here, because it does give the basic explanation for what codependency is. And it'd be really good for me to learn this, because if I'm actually doing using any kind of codependent behaviors, that I'm not even aware of, it'd be nice to know, and then I could work on changing that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm glad to be able to do these shows, and I'm going to continue on for another half hour, and we'll be on until 7 o'clock instead of 6:30 this morning, and I'll just change the show notes to reflect that, so people will know that that the show doesn't pick up until the end of the show. So this information is from recoveryworld.com, and that's www.recovery-world.com, and then /co-dependency.html. And they said here, welcome to Recovery World Codependency. They said codependency is a progressive disease brought about by child abuse, which takes the form of anything less than nurturing. Codependency is epidemic. Maybe all of us are codependent, and defines a vast array of psychological and physical symptoms. The caring manifested by codependence is an unconscious effort to keep repressed pain at bay, and the codependent actually contributes to the addictive behavior of their loved ones by enabling. Enabling keeps the loved one addicted, so the codependent can go on caring to gain a sense of self-worth. And recovery from codependency requires a drastic attitude and lifestyle change. It says a lifetime commitment to the 12-step regime. And this would be maybe if we were like if alcoholics and drug users and whatnot. There's, I guess, within that a lot of codependency. See, and this is something that I just didn't know much about. Hadn't heard a whole lot about it. Just the odd thing, and somebody would say, well, I think our mom was codependent, or, people, like some siblings would say, I think that our family members are codependent, but I never did check it out to see what it actually was. So, we have about a minute left of the actual live show, and then I'm going to go ahead and continue talking until about 7 o'clock, so we'll stand for half an hour. And it says codependency is a learned behavior that can be passed down from one generation to another. It's an emotional and behavioral condition that affects an individual's ability to have a healthy, mutually satisfying relationship. It is also known as relationship addiction, because people with codependency often form or maintain relationships that are one-sided, emotionally destructive, and or abusive. And the result of years of studying interpersonal relationships in families of alcoholics, codependent behavior is learned by watching and imitating other family members who display this type of behavior. And they go on to say here, codependency often affects a spouse, a parent, sibling, friend, or coworker of a person afflicted with alcohol or drug dependence. Originally, codependent was a term used to describe partners in chemical dependency, persons living with or in a relationship with an addicted person. Similar patterns have been seen in people in relationships with chronically or mentally ill individuals. And today, however, the term has broadened to describe any codependent person from any dysfunctional family. So that's quite interesting, I think. That's about all they have written up on this website. And they say, are you a codependent person? 12 Steps of Codependence Anonymous. Then they also list here the 12 Traditions of Codependence Anonymous, and characteristics of codependent people are, and I guess we could take a look at that. They have this Recovery World actually has chat rooms and online meetings and email meetings and forums and group membership and whatnot. And this is the first time I've seen the website, because I've just recently, just actually yesterday was looking into this, and so it's really relatively new to me, and I had never seen it before. So if anybody's looking for anything like that, you can find it at, I'll give you the website again, www.recovery-world.com, and then /co-dependency.html. And it says here, are you a codependent person? So maybe we'll just take a look at that, It says, questionnaire to identify signs of codependency. This condition appears to run in different degrees, whereby the intensity of symptoms are on a spectrum of severity as opposed to an all or nothing scale. And they said, please note that only a qualified professional can make a diagnosis of codependency. Not everyone experiencing these symptoms suffers from codependency. And that's what they always say, because, some people, it might look like they suffer from codependency or something else, PTSD or something, but unless you're actually diagnosed with it, then we really don't know. And that's why I don't, I might recognize some of this stuff within myself, but I don't usually say, well, I've got that. I've got PTSD, or I suffer from this or that. I suffer from the symptoms of some of that stuff. I've never been diagnosed. So, it's a good idea to actually, if you really think that you have, these issues and stuff, and you're thinking, man, I wonder if I do, it's a good idea that we get, help and try to find out whether we do or not, and then we can get help, right? That's the whole issue, right? I've never reached out for help prior to the last 7 or 8 months. And so, I never thought of going to a counselor or therapist. As a matter of fact, it scared me to think about that, because I thought, well, if I'm crazy, they'll put me away. And that's because my parents were always talking about that. I know I've talked about that on quite a few of my shows. And my parents were always really paranoid about the fact that if a counselor or a therapist got a hold of our information, they would just use it against us or use it against them. And so they were always telling us, oh, you can't trust those people. Just our whole lives, we just heard this stuff, right? And it's because my parents had to go to counseling because they were brought up on abuse charges. So of course, they didn't want to, have to go to any more counseling, because they would have had to straighten up, and they didn't want to straighten up. But for people that are really suffering and people that really need help, I've talked to quite a few counselors, therapist type people in the last 7 months. I can probably name them on one hand. But the thing is, I've talked to enough of them to realize that, hey, they're people too, and they're doing that job, mainly the ones that I've met, because they want to help people, and they themselves have dealt with a lot of stuff in their own lives, and they know what it's like to be suffering through with this stuff. I've never had a counselor or therapist, and I've heard stories about people who have said, well, this counselor or therapist just didn't work for me, and so they're still, they search for other counselors or therapists. But the thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. If we reach out and we finally, do the right thing, really, which is to get help, and we run into, let's say I run into a therapist that is just not working for me, well, then I can try another one. You know what I mean? I can just say, well, I think I need to find another therapist because this is not working. We're not connecting. I don't feel comfortable. Because I've seen that on too many websites, and I would hope that that's true. That, if something is not working for us, that we could find out what is. We could find another therapist. We could find another counselor, and we could really get the help that we need. Right? So important. So I'm not beyond that now. But let's say even a year ago, I might have still not been all that comfortable with the whole thought, of getting therapy or counseling, right? Even though 3 years ago, I really started my healing journey. This doesn't have my attitude towards the whole thing hadn't really been any different, until about I would say last September, October. So that's the thing; it hasn't even been a year. And now I'm thinking, hey, if we need help, then we should get help, because at some point in people's lives, we all need help. Can't imagine anybody getting through this life without needing help at some point. So they list here the actual sort of, I guess, what would how we could sort of take a look at how if we had these symptoms, then we might be codependent. So on this website, they said if we have some of these symptoms, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're codependent, and that we'd have to have a diagnosis from a qualified professional. So, but I'll read through them anyway, because it'd be quite interesting to see. They said here, question 1, do you keep quiet to avoid arguments? Question number 2 is, are you always worried about others' opinions of you? Question number 3, have you ever lived with someone with an alcohol or drug problem? Question number 4, have you ever lived with someone who hits or belittles you? Question 5, are the opinions of others more important than your own? And question 6, do you have difficulty adjusting to changes at work or home? And question 7, do you feel rejected when significant others spend time with friends? And question 8 is, do you doubt your ability to be who you want to be? Question 9, are you uncomfortable expressing your true feelings to others? Question 10, have you ever felt inadequate? Question 11 is, do you feel like a bad person when you make a mistake? Question 12, do you have difficulty taking compliments or gifts? And question 13, do you feel humiliation when your child or spouse makes a mistake? Question 14, do you think people in your life would go downhill without your constant efforts? And question 15, do you frequently wish someone could help you get things done? And question 16, do you have difficulty talking to people in authority, such as the police or your boss? And question 17 is, are you confused about who you are and where you are going with your life? Question 18, do you have trouble saying no when asked for help? And question 19, do you have trouble asking for help? And the last question they have here is, do you have so many things going at once that you can't do justice to any of them? Excuse me. Oh, got allergies. Oh, I'm telling you, pretty bad. Those are interesting questions, actually, because I recognize a lot of that stuff. Does it mean I'm codependent? Not necessarily. That's the thing, right? I mean, we might have some of these symptoms, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're codependent. I wouldn't want to self-diagnose myself, right? That's why I don't self-diagnose myself with any kind of personality issue, or anything like that regarding the abuse in the family that I grew up in, the abuse I suffered as a child, because I very well might not have that. So I don't want to say that I did. I have some of the symptoms of some of the stuff. I recognize some of it, right? Because I see it and I'm like, okay, well, I recognize that and that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I've got it. And so I think that's why, it's a good idea to not take this on as saying, oh, look, I've got these symptoms, I must be codependent. Because that's how my dad is. If he finds anything out, he's got it. If he hears his friend's got cancer, then he's got cancer. My dad's like that. He's very much a paranoid individual, and he won't get help. And he should have been on medication and had therapy when he was young. And he's now almost 90 years old. But he takes on whatever anybody's talking about. So if he was to actually listen to this show, he would say like, oh, I must be codependent. I'm codependent. And he would take it on as being codependent, whether he was diagnosed or not. Right? He's got every disease and everything going because he hears something and he's got it. Right? And so that's why we can't do that. We can't sit there and say, oh, I have 10 of these questions I actually relate to. That must be, I'm codependent. No, that's just not the case. But if we might relate to some of it, and then we could go on, and if we did go and get some help, which we should, we could get a diagnosis whether we are or not, and then learn how to deal with it. And that's the whole thing. So I'm not going to say, oh, I'm codependent because I recognize probably 16 out of these 20 questions as being part of my behavior. You know what I mean? So that's why it's important to not do that when they do these questionnaires. But what it does is it gives you an idea, and it gives me an idea of what a codependent person is like. And if they actually are codependent, these would be some of the symptoms or all of the symptoms that they might experience. So it's quite interesting. And just to look back at the questions, do you keep quiet to avoid arguments? That's definitely not me. If I don't like something, I don't mind speaking out about it, even if it means losing my job, because that's the whole issue, is that I don't take any flack off very many people. So, I don't keep quiet to avoid arguments at all. I'm more than likely to be in there. I don't start them either, you know what I mean? But if somebody wants to start an argument with me, I'll be the one to finish it, for sure. I don't mind arguing, you know what I mean? And especially if it has something to do with my integrity, even at work, I've been known to write letters to the top officials and ask for apologies, and, I feel like people just have no right to treat people badly. I don't care if it's a person at work, or I don't care if it's a person at the gas station or grocery store or whatever, you know what I mean? People just have no right to treat people rudely and insensitively, and because to me that's abuse on top of more abuse, when somebody does stuff like that. And they need to apologize when they're wrong, whether it's a boss or a friend or whatever. And if they don't apologize and they don't see anything wrong with their behavior, then I make sure that they know what they did is wrong. And then I'm out of the whole picture. I will not hang around people like that. So, in that area, I don't think I'm codependent. It says here, number 2, are you always worried about others' opinions of you? I used to be really highly, extremely worried about others' opinions about me when I was growing up, especially my teenage years, early 20s and stuff like that. And because I knew the family that I grew up in, I was still very closely sort of related to it, hadn't been away from it for years, and so I was always concerned whether people knew there was something wrong with me, knew there was something wrong with my family, you know what I mean? Just felt very inadequate, you know what I mean, as a person. So I was always concerned about whether people's opinions of me. Now I don't care, you know what I mean? I really honestly don't. I like for people to like me, and I like to do a good job. But, if someone doesn't like me, well, that's okay, because I just found out that sometimes people will not like us. And, and that's sad, because I used to be the type that wanted everybody to like me, and probably because of the home that I grew up in. You know what I mean? So, of course I wanted everybody to like me, right? Thing is that I realized that not everybody will. And I learned that at an early age. You know what I mean? In high school and junior high and stuff, some people just didn't like me, and actually would tell me to my face that they didn't like me, and it was hurtful for sure, because I was looking for any kind of attention or affection that I could get that would have been a positive sort of reaction, because there was really not a whole lot of positives in our home, and once in a while there'd be something good going on in the home when I was growing up, but it was very rare, and then it wouldn't last, right? And that's the whole issue, right? I mean, it's hard on kids when they grow up like that, right? And then they want so badly for the world to like them, if their own family is not treating them right, and their own parents are not treating them right, and then quite often they're looking for the world to treat them right, So it was very hurtful, and it used to bother me, and I used to wonder what people thought of me, and cared very much about what people thought about me, and now I'm like, I don't care. I'm doing the best job I can, and I know there'll be people that don't like me, and there'll be people that do have these opinions of me, in my own family especially right now because of what I'm doing. They definitely have opinions about me, and I can't live my life according to their opinions. I have to live my life, and then I have to be okay with it. So at the end of the road, it's not up to me to be okay with whether they were okay with it or not. You know what I mean? Like when I pass on, it's not going to really make much sense or matter whether my family was actually okay with what I was doing with my life. What really counts is what I'm thinking is okay. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the road, it's my life, and we have to live our life according to the way that we need to live it. And so if people don't necessarily agree or like with what we're doing and can't get behind what we're doing, quite often it has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with them. And so, not everybody's going to back up what we do. Not everyone's going to want to be a part of what we're a part of. And that's the truth. And that's all there is to it. Because people are different personality types, and everyone is different, right? And you can see that within siblings, I mean, my siblings right now just they just cannot figure out why I'm doing what I'm doing to try to stop child abuse. And even though they grew up in this stupid home that I grew up in, it's just so beyond them why anybody would want to get involved and stop child abuse. So they can't see why. But then again, they can't see why anybody would get involved to do anything. They're not the type to care. You know what I mean? So they don't care about anything going on around the world. They don't care about injustices. They don't care about domestic violence and abuse situations. They just don't care about people, period. They care about themselves. That's what I think. Because anybody who thinks like that is very self-centered. So the siblings that are left, and my 2 siblings who are still on the planet, are very self-centered, and they only think of themselves. My one sister, she'll do anything for you, but she won't really, doesn't want to be a part of anything that you're a part of. She wants you to be a part of what she's a part of, but she will not do anything that has anything to do with what she doesn't, with what she's doing, right? So it's like, there's no compromise. And my brother, he's the same way. There's no compromise with him. It just has to be all about him or it's nothing. And you know what? They can just live their lives and do their own thing. I'm too busy. You know what I mean? And I made, 500-600 friends, which is just awesome. And I've got, a whole life ahead of me, and I can't be concerned whether or not my siblings are okay and what their opinions are about what I'm doing with the rest of my life. Because I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. I will be working to stop child abuse in some way for the rest of my days. So see, if they're not okay with it, I can't go and live my life according to them and what they think, you know what I mean? I have to be cool with what I'm doing, because at the end of the road, I'm going to be the one that's responsible for my own happiness and my own peace, my own peace of mind, right? And so that's why that's so important, right? Not to live your life according to what somebody else would have you do just because you're concerned about their opinions of you. You know, I mean, my family could come and tell me right now that they will never talk to me ever again if I continue doing these shows and continue writing books about child abuse and putting out my own story, and which, you know, they would, they would have to probably in a court of law admit some of it. But, you know, whether they would fully ever admit it, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Because truth is truth, and I'm willing to put myself out there to have the truth be known. And so it doesn't matter to me what they think. I don't personally care what they think. You know, if I wanted to get involved years ago with 3 years ago anyway, international community development, they thought that was stupid. You know, why would you want to help other people around the world? Why would you care about people who are suffering around the world is their question to me. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that's just stupid, right? And I'm thinking, no, somebody needs to care. And if you don't, too bad. I don't care. I'm moving on. You know, and now with the whole issue with working with dream catchers for abused children and trying to work to stop child abuse, they just think it's a joke. And I'm like, you know what? Think it's a joke. I don't care. You're not in my life anyway. You know what I mean? I got a job to do, and, you know, I'm happy doing it. And at the end of the road, when I leave this earth, I'm going to be able to go in peace because I will know that I was able to do what I wanted to do. And that's why we can't really let other people's opinions stop us from doing what we need to do. And the third question, have you ever lived with someone with an alcohol or drug problem? And I mean, my brothers were drug users. My parents were not. My dad was a sort of a strange person. He used to drink NyQuil and cough syrup, and he was always drinking cough syrup, right? I mean, he would drink bottles of this stuff, right? My mom was always trying to get him to stop doing that. And but that, you know, that's pretty much all he was doing. I think, you know, he was not a drinker. Both of them did not drink alcohol, unless my mom was a closet drinker, but you'd think I would have realized it or known. I don't think that she was. She liked to have the odd drink, and so my dad was really not really a drinker at all. And, you know, he wouldn't even have a drink at somebody's house for like New Year's, you know, champagne or anything like that. He's just not a drinker, and my mom was not either, but my brothers were drug addicts from a very young age. Right? And my parents allowed it. And pretty much the reason why my parents allowed it is because they had already, if people would get a grip, and people who actually know the family and know me, if they're listening to these shows, just think about it very carefully. My parents were brought up on abuse charges, right? When my brother went to school with a turtleneck on, he was bruised and he was beaten up, and he went to the school in the summertime in a winter turtleneck. And the teacher noticed, and she noticed the bruises on his face, took him to the nurse, and he told the nurse that they took a look at him, and he said, "Oh, I'm afraid to go home. I'm afraid of my dad." Right? So they got the CPS or DHS, whoever was at the time involved. And so, you know, when things would happen in the family, my parents, of course, would not take the kids to they did not want to get busted again, right? They did not want to lose. My mom did not want to lose us. She used to keep saying, "Oh, I didn't want to lose my children," you know. And so she would let her sons get involved with drugs and then be involved in drugs around the house even, you know what I mean? And even my dad, like, they did nothing to help my brothers. They allowed them to be drug users and did not at all, when they were young, like 12, 13, 14 years old, did not try to get them help. But that was the 60s, so, you know, you can imagine, like, that was sort of the scene, you know what I mean? Which is very sad, because they should have put their foot down and said, no, as parents, we cannot condone your drug use, you know what I mean? Because we love you, and we don't want to see you ruin your life with drugs, and we want you to get some help. But instead of that, all they'd do is take their stuff when they could find it, and their stash and whatever, and get rid of it. Because my parents were like two of the most ignorant people on the planet that I've ever met. I mean, and not even to their detriment or their fault. I mean, it was to their detriment. It wasn't their fault. They grew up in very ignorant situations. Like, their parents were very ignorant. My grandparents were born in the late 1800s on both sides. Can you imagine? My parents were born in 1923, 1927. And my grandparents were born in 1890. That's my grandparents. So people have a little bit of a hard time getting a grip on that. You know what I mean? That's why I don't know my grandparents. I only met one of my grandmas. and the one that killed her son, which I did not like her at all, and I didn't have any love for her in my heart for sure. But that's the thing, that my parents came from the late 1800s. Their parents were really, really old-fashioned people and had no clue about how to raise children. They knew how to raise livestock. They were farmers, and they knew how to raise crops, but they had no concept of how to raise children. And then my parents came along in the 20s, and their parents had no skills, no parenting skills. So they didn't learn any parenting skills. They just learned how to be sort of like, if we were growing up on a farm, we would have just been ordered around and beaten because we didn't do our chores, right? But we were growing up in a small house, with 3 rooms and a living room and a kitchen, right? A very small house for 7 kids to be in with 2 adults, right? So the situation was really bad. The quarters were very small. Nobody had any parenting skills, and they sure as heck didn't know how to help their children. They couldn't even help themselves. So it is quite interesting when you take a look at it. I come from my grandparents, late 1800s. Their parents, my great-grandparents, were actually born in 1850, 1840. They had their children late. They never started having children for the families, my actual generation, going back 3 generations, did not start having children until they were in their 40s. So that's why it went, it skipped so many years. You know what I mean? It's really quite interesting. And then they had children, quite a few children, you know what I mean? Large families, up until they just died, right? Because somebody had to help them run the farm, And so, yeah, my generations, just my great-grandparents were born in the 1850s, right? Maybe I think one of them was born in 1840 or something like that. But we've got family trees on all sides. So, people have done the research and gone back and looked at it, and I just thought it was just bizarre. So, we're only 3 generations away from, or 2 generations away from 1850, And so there was no education, and my parents did not know how to help their sons. They didn't know how to help themselves, and they didn't know anything about parenting or how to actually live this life. They were just so confused. And so, they just allowed the drug use to go on. It didn't get my brothers any help. And at one point, my brother had to, because my parents were living in the States, and they were all living with green cards in the United States. I was born there, so I was really the only person that was actually born in the States. And everybody else was an immigrant, because they all had their green cards. They were all born in Canada. And so my brother, he was busted for some sort of thing that he did, whether it was robbing a pharmacy or what, I don't know exactly which one it was, because he was always getting busted for something. And he had the option of either going to jail or going to a drug rehab, right? Because I think it was when he ripped off that pharmacy that one time. And so the FBI was involved, and they said, look, you can either go to a drug rehab center, or you can go to jail, or you can go to Canada. You know what I mean? Like, you have to make up your mind what you're doing, but we're not going to take this anymore as the United States of America goes. You're not going to be able to just run around and rob things and just do whatever you want. You're going to have to, straighten up. So my brother went to that rehab place, right? And it was kind of a lockdown place, but it wasn't like a tight security. And he got out. He was only there for about 2 weeks and couldn't deal with it. Didn't like it. It was too harsh, And he was on drugs. He needed serious help. And he escaped from there, came home, was hiding in the house. The FBI came over looking for him. My mom's like, oh, no, he's not here, right? And I knew he was there. And I'm like, oh, no, he's not here, right? Because I'm not going to narc my brother out. Probably should have. He'd probably still be alive today, right? It's too bad. But I was only 12 years old, 13 years old. So then he, after the FBI left, my mom and dad shipped him off to Canada, and he was gone. And I never saw him again. And then he died so many years later. I never did see him again. So that was the last time I saw my brother. And it was very, very sad. And he was 7 years older than me, so he was 19 years old. Yeah, 19 years old when he had to leave to Canada. And then I never saw him again, and he died at the age of 44 up here in his drug shelter. And not in a drug shelter, in a shelter for a drug overdose. So, that's just unfortunate. That's the way this sort of stuff can happen. You know what I mean? And my parents allowed it. And that's why, I sort of do blame them. It's not like my brothers actually started doing drugs after they moved out of the home, and my parents really couldn't do anything about it. Like, my parents did absolutely nothing to try to get them help because my mom was very self-centered and only concerned with herself. She only cared about her pain and her needs and her wants and the fact that nobody was helping her. And we were also miserable to her, right? She didn't care that her sons were, overdosing and stuff like that. And at the time, when they overdosed, she'd be a little bit pissed off and upset about it. But mainly, her concern was herself, She was a very self-centered, very selfish woman. And if my sister Irene was here, alive today, that's the one who passed away from cancer, she would talk a lot about that, because she used to actually talk a lot about the fact that when she was growing up, our mother was very, very selfish. And, if there was any kind of food or treat, because my parents were, my dad was withholding money from my mom and withholding food as well. So my mom would, have to share the food with all these, I don't know how many kids, Irene and Kevin and Rob and Chess, and I don't even think maybe Howard might have been just a baby or something. So with 5 kids, they'd have, a potato. They'd have to share, a potato. And then my mom would go and sneak off and go drink a Pepsi or a Coke and have some sort of a treat, and the kids wouldn't get it. And Irene said that my mom was really quite often doing that. And the kids would be stuck eating one potato. And they were literally starving to get for a while, because my dad was withholding money and it's very abusive. He was not a nice man, So, my sister would probably love to chime in right now if she was here and could do it, but she's not here with us. So, it's really quite interesting. It's very, very sad how people screw up their children's lives. So, number 4, have you ever lived with someone who hits or belittles you? And, this could be for people in a domestic violence situation, could be for a roommate situation, could be for, anybody who's living with somebody who hits them or belittles them. And, I grew up with that, I was being hit and belittled quite often. And a lot of people I knew were as well. You know what I mean? So that's horrible, you know what I mean? To do that to people. And, that's what we talk about on my shows all the time. Number 5, are the opinions of others more important than your own? And, sometimes people are like that. At one point in my lifetime, I might have thought that I was like that somebody else's opinion would be more important than mine. Now I'm not necessarily like that. I do value other people's opinions, but I don't make them what I live by. You know what I mean? I value people's opinions, and I also value people's, constructive criticism. I don't take any kind of garbage off people. But if somebody has something constructive for me to tell me, I'm okay with it, because I realize that they're just trying to be helpful. And it very well might be something I can use to help myself or to do something a better way. You know what I mean? So I can take constructive criticism. I didn't used to be able to, because, growing up abused and stuff like that, I wasn't able to take any criticism, period. I considered it abuse, right? Somebody would criticize what I was doing. It would either send me off in tears or it would make me irate. And then people would have to watch out, because I'd be like, you want to criticize me? I can show you some real, some of this behavior that you don't want to see, right? Because I was either crying or I was violent, one or the other, right? So, people quite often, stayed away from me, you know what I mean? They just didn't have much to do with me. So, but now I can take constructive criticism. I just won't take any garbage off people. And the minute somebody starts getting rude, I just tell them like it is. I just won't put up with it. Number 6, okay, that number 5 is, are the opinions of others more important than your own? Number 6, do you have difficulty adjusting to changes at work or home? And that's a lot of people have difficulty with that. That doesn't necessarily mean we're codependent, right? Some people just don't like change. And, they don't like change at home. They don't like change at work. They don't like change, period. And I know lots of people like that, and I've worked with lots and lots of people like that. And on most jobs that I've ever had in life, there's always change. And people are always freaked out about it. It's like, oh no, change, I can't handle it. And I'd just be sitting next to him going, well, everything changes. It's how we cope with it, really, that matters, right? Everything is going to change. So, I realize that. Not much stays the same. Eventually it will change. So, but I know some people are very uncomfortable with change and, have a real problem with it. I don't have a problem with change. So that's one thing I don't necessarily relate to. I know that there are lots and lots of people that do, though. And it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just that, that's how, everybody's different, Number 7, do you feel rejected when significant others spend time with friends? And that doesn't bother me at all. I don't have that problem. My sweetheart, I don't care. I'm always happy to see him do something with somebody else and have friends and do other things. It doesn't bother me at all. So there's no sort of jealousy to that sort of thing. Like, why would he want to spend time with someone else? He should be with me. I don't have any of that behavior. I don't have any of that going on in my life. But it is quite interesting because I know lots of people probably do, and they get hurt by it. And to me, it's like I'm happy when somebody's happy. If somebody's happy around me in my life, I'm happy for them that they're happy and that it makes me happy. And I don't need to be attached to them 24 hours a day to feel happy or to feel love. So I'm okay in that department. I don't need my sweetheart. We don't even live together, and we spend a few hours a week, together, and yet we're close in heart, and we have a good relationship, and it's cool. He can do whatever he wants during his time, when we do get together, we have a great time, and I don't sit and worry about what he's doing and who he's talking to, and I don't care who he's talking to. It makes no difference to me because I know when I see him the next time, but we're going to have a great time. But that's the trust issue. It's the fact that, I trust him. I wouldn't be in the relationship if I didn't, because I told him when we first got together, I was like, we have to trust each other. If we don't trust each other, we have no business being together. Because my parents did not. It's not that my mom didn't trust my dad. My dad did not trust my mom. So there was always this huge trust issue going on between my parents, and because he was concerned that she was always sleeping around with everybody, like the postman, the paper delivery guy, the neighbor. He was accusing her of sleeping with everybody, really, just anybody, her doctor, because my dad is very sick, right? He's a very sick man. And my mom, of course, would not. I don't believe that my mom have slept with anybody. And if there was DNA test done, paternity DNA test done, would be proven that all of us, sadly, all of us siblings are his. But my dad was always accusing my mom of being unfaithful and making her feel, extremely bad, right? Because he was very jealous and he was very untrusting, right? Probably because he's untrustworthy. I wouldn't doubt that he, I don't know if he ever, was it unfaithful to my mom or not. But in his mind, he might have been. You know what I mean? In his mind, he might have thought that he would rather be with these other women. And so he would think that, oh, maybe my wife is doing the same thing. Oh, I can't trust her. You know what I mean? It's so sad when people are like that, because that's no way to live. And that's why I told my sweetheart, right, Cecil, I told him, I said, if we're not going to trust each other, we have no business being together. If I can't trust you, then what's the point of us staying together? And if you can't trust me, there's no sense in us continuing this relationship on, because we'll just be miserable. We'll make each other miserable. We'll be horrible partners. We won't have any sense of love or care. It'll just all be about this trust relationship, this trust issue between us. But he had to prove himself trustworthy, and I talk about that quite a bit in my book, A Life of Death or Redemption, because I didn't trust very many people to get that close to me. So, when we did get together, I knew that, if I told him, I said, if you're going to be unfaithful to me, then you come and tell me to my face. If you'd rather see somebody else, then you better tell me straight up, because I don't want to find out the hard way. I'd rather just have you tell me to my face, and we can end it, and you can go on and be happy. And the same with me. If I find somebody that I just, didn't realize I cared about, and that all of a sudden I care about them more than you, then I'm going to tell you straight up, so that you're not finding out behind the scenes. Because there's no sense in dragging somebody along in a relationship just so the other person can have 2 or 3 people in their lives, whether it's, women or men, right? 2 or 3 other partners, just they can run around and have their flings, right? I mean, that's just sad behavior, and we see a lot of that today. So I had to really, Cecil had to prove himself trustworthy. I didn't just trust him and say, I trust you, and, it took me about a year, probably a year and a half, to get a grip on whether or not I trusted him. And I think that's why people, when they get together in relationships, they get together too soon. They get together too quick, because they're so much in love and they just want to spend all this time with each other, so they rush it. And they don't really know this other person. They don't really know what they're like. They don't really know anything about them. And all of a sudden they find themselves living together, or married. And then it just goes downhill from there. I think people should really get to know each other before they move in together, and before they, that's something that I learned, that, it's important, because you can't trust everybody. Look at all the divorces going on, people sleeping around with everybody and then finally deciding, oh, well, I just get a divorce, after they get busted sleeping with 10 people, you know what I mean? And this is men or women, right? Not just men, not just women. So it's really pathetic how people are. And so you cannot just trust everybody. But then again, if you just don't learn to trust anyone, then you will never, ever be able to have a good relationship. And that's what I realized about myself. That's why I decided to start learning to try to trust people. Because I thought, hey, if I don't learn to trust people, I'm going to have a miserable existence on this planet. It'll be very lonely. And, I thought, that's sad, So I had to learn to do this, and it took some time, and I tried to be true to myself and true to everybody else around me, and as far as relationships goes, and learn how to trust people, right? Because I want to be trusted. I want to prove myself trustworthy with people in my life, right? So that's why, it's important for them to do the same for me. And I sort of demand it. I actually kind of command it and demand it from people. If people are going to be in my life, then they're going to have to be trustworthy, because I am. So therefore, I'm not going to do anything like that to hurt them. So I don't want the same behavior put back to me. But we do have to be, careful. And it's not like we're never going to be hurt. That's the sad part. We know eventually, at some point, we will be hurt. People just can't help themselves, right? They're just stupid and ignorant when it comes to that stuff, right? So, I think that we just have to be very careful what we're doing, very cautious, and not jump into things without really knowing what we're doing and knowing who we're jumping into the things with, right? So it's very important so that we don't get hurt, right, too much. It says here, number 7, do you feel rejected when significant others spend time with their friends? Okay, that's what we just left off here. Question 8, do you doubt your ability to be who you want to be? That's a good question, I think for sometimes we do have doubts about what, whether or not we can actually do what we want to do or be what we want to be, right? Because this world's, pretty tough, it's pretty high standards, and you got to have education quite often, and, sometimes we physically can't do the job, Like for me, I can't cook anymore in the kitchens, and I love cooking. Went to school to learn how to be a cook, never got my degree. I didn't get my red seal or anything like that. I was really going for a red seal, and then was going to see about getting a gold seal to be a real chef, papered chef, and I missed it because my brother died up here in Canada from that drug overdose, and I didn't go back to school for my baking course because my mom fell and broke her hip and had that stroke, and that was just a year and a bit before I moved up here, right? So I missed that baking course, and so I didn't get my red seal, which is unfortunate. But I love cooking, and I thought, you know what, who cares about the seal? Lots of cooks have the seal, the red seal and the gold seal, and they can't cook worth of beans. So I thought, you can either cook or you can't, and no paper is going to prove whether I can cook or not. Online with the guys in the restaurants, right? Mainly men in the line there on the hot food line at night, and I really wanted to do that because I wanted to prove to myself I could do it. I didn't necessarily want to prove it to the guys. I don't care about them. I wanted to prove it to myself to see if I could do it because I really like that whole thing. I like cooking. I really enjoy it, and so. Yeah, I just thought, who cares if I have the papers? I don't care. I'm just going to go and cook and prove whether I can do this or not. And so I did that off and on for, about 15 years or so. And a little bit, yeah, probably somewhere in there. And even if it's just part-time, I would still cook and I would still work in offices. But then I'd have these part-time cooking jobs because I really love to cook, right? But I physically can't do it anymore because I can't be on my foot I can't even be on my foot for more than 4 hours. So I can't do an 8 to 10 hour shift anymore on my feet, period. Because my ankle is just lame, and the next day I won't be able to walk. So I can only do a job where there's minimal walking and minimal standing. So I'm sort of stuck now with these office jobs, you know what I mean? But that was my mentality before I got involved to do what I'm doing now. And now I'm thinking, hey, that's okay because now I found what I really want to do. So, we have to... As far as doubting our abilities, sometimes we can't do things, right? Whether because of this physical aspect of it or just this whole situation, like I want to be an airplane pilot, but I'm 50 years old. It's like, well, you might be able to be a small plane, small aircraft pilot, but would you ever be able to be a commercial jet pilot? I don't know. Probably not. And if you're air traffic controllers, they have to have 20/20 vision. They have to have perfect vision. If you have any kind of messed up vision, you can't be an air traffic controller. And so there's certain things, that we can't do, right? But what we have to do is find out what we can do and then go for it and really believe in ourselves, and I'm a big one for that because my parents told me I'd never make it. My parents said, you'll never make it. You're just a loser. You know what I mean? My mom would say that to me. she'd be like, you can't do it. You're just useless. You're just stupid and useless. And I would just be like, oh, you think so? Well, I'll prove you wrong. You know what I mean? As soon as they would say that to me, and I think I don't know whether she was just being abusive and rude or whether she was using reverse psychology, but whatever it was, it worked. Because anytime she would say that, I would go out and do exactly what she said I couldn't do. Because I'd be like, oh, well, I'll show you. You know, I can do it, and I don't care what you think. You know, so I took it kind of harsh because of the way she treated me, and you know what I mean? I took it as abuse, not as a reverse psychology thing. I think had my mom treated me more decently, and you know, told me she loved me and was kind to me and didn't hurt me, I would have took that as a reverse psychology, and I would have still probably done it. But because she was so abusive and so mean to me, mainly, I took that as abuse, and so I was mad. I'd be like, no, I can do it, and I will prove it. So you know, I do believe in myself. I do believe in my abilities, and some things I try and I fail. That happens to me all the time because I'm willing to try it. See, and so in doing so, sometimes I fail, and sometimes that's hard for people because you have to be okay with that, right? Because we're not going to succeed or win at everything. At some point we will fail. And we have to recognize that when we do fail, it's okay, because we tried it. We tried. So if we fail, oh well, too bad. Move on, find something else, and put that one behind us. I've done stuff that would just freak people out, the stuff that I've done and failed at, and you know, made a mess of. And you know, that's maybe for another book. But the thing is I'm willing to try, and if I fail, at least I can say, hey, I tried. You know, so I failed, okay, right? And it is a little hard to take sometimes when we fail, right? It is a little bit hard on the ego, and it can bring you down, because if you really wanted to do that and then it didn't work out, then you're kind of sad. But hey, better to try than not to try and sit back and just think, oh, should I have done that? I should have done that. You don't want to second guess yourself or wonder about this stuff. If you live to be 80 years old and you're only in your 30s, you don't want to sit there and let life pass you by, and then when you're 80, say, I should have taken the chances. I should have taken the opportunities to do what I wanted to do and to believe in myself and to go for it, right? Because that just drives me crazy when people do stuff like that. And then they sit around moaning and complaining at the age of 80 saying, oh, poor me, I never got to do this, and I never did that. And it's like, well, why? Why didn't you do that? You should have done that. If you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, go climb it. If you want to open up a restaurant, open up your restaurant. You know, if you want to become a physiotherapist, go be a physiotherapist. But if you fail, well, at least you tried, right? So to me, that is just so important, right? To trust and believe in ourselves enough to be able to do what we want to do. Now, I never did have too much problems with that, you know what I mean, as far as going out and trying stuff, you know what I mean, because I realized that, you know, life was going to be pretty much a drag if I didn't, and I needed to go for it, you know. But, you know, if we might fail, but I think it's worth it. It's worth a try. That's what I think. And it says here, number 9, are you uncomfortable expressing your true feelings to others? And I think we'll stop at this one. We'll pick up with number 10 tomorrow. It says, are you uncomfortable expressing your true feelings to others? I know I'm not, because I had to be able to do that, you know what I mean, in order to help myself. You know, I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable telling their true feelings, but that's because maybe they're not sure about their true feelings. And me, I'm very much a person who sits and makes sure that I know what I'm feeling and I know what I'm doing and the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, because then I know what my motivation is behind it. So as far as my true feelings go, I mean, sometimes I'll sit and think about them first before I talk to anybody about them, but generally I'll get my feelings in order and I'll place them where they need to be placed in the whole scheme of things, and then I don't mind talking about them then, right? Because I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and understand why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And some people don't spend that much time thinking about that stuff, but I'm a thinker, and I've always been a thinker, right? I've been doing this my whole life, and because of the family I grew up in, trying to figure out why my brothers were suffering, why my mom was suffering, why my dad was suffering, why my sisters were doing what they were doing, why, you know what I mean? Because I was the youngest of 7, and I was always concerned about what was going on in the home. There was just a lot of problems, so obviously I was paying attention. And it just bothered me, because I'd sit there and go, why does this have to happen? You know, my brother, after my brother was murdered, when I was about 8 years old, my brother Chess was murdered, and he was killed. It was they don't know whether it was an accident or whether it was a murder, right? They had to rule it as unknown, like an accident, because they weren't sure. They couldn't prove at the time if it was murder. And so, which I think it was, and other people do too. There was witnesses that actually said they think that it was murder, but the FBI couldn't prove it, and it was solved. It was a cold case, right? It was just unsolved. So my other brother, who was just a year older, took it really hard because the two of them used to sort of try to help each other and back each other up, and so my brother Rob, he spent about a year in his room, and he wouldn't come out of his room, and he had the biggest room in the place, and we lived in a really small house. We always lived in really tiny, small little houses, right? But he had the big room, right? And he would light candles. He wouldn't turn the lights on or anything like that. He would spend a whole year in there. He didn't come out at all. Like, I think he had to come out to use the bathroom, but that was it. And he would not come out of his room after my brother died and got killed there. And he just sat in his own space, in his own sadness and despair. That's the one who killed himself, right, up here in Canada. He was just so down, And I used to feel bad for him, I was 8 years old. I used to go into his room and try to comfort him, and I'd just be like, oh, how come you're sad? Let's go for a walk or whatever, right? And he would not do it. He would walk around the room, but he would not go outside, and he had his windows blacked out, and he was just sitting in darkness, And there's my mom, because she was so depressed, right, because her son had been killed. And that was the first one in the family, the first one we lost in our family, and so she didn't take it well. Her physical health was no good. I actually talk a lot about this in my book, because that was a house from hell, you know what I mean? That was one of the worst times in my entire lifetime, and it went on for four years. So it was absolutely horrible. And that's the thing. It's like I realized at that point that the reason why the person I am, who I am, and who I am very much a thinker and always thinking, is because of the situation I grew up in. So I'm okay with expressing my true feelings. I don't mind. And sometimes people might not want to hear them, but they get to hear them anyway, because I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be, if it's anything I'm going to be on this planet, it's going to be honest. You know what I mean? Because if I can't do anything else but just be honest, really honest, and try to be as honest as possible, even with myself, and honest to other people, then this life doesn't mean much. Because really that's all we have, really, is truth and honesty. The rest is just garbage, deceit, and lies and bullshit. You know what I mean? So I don't mind expressing my true feelings, because I'd rather not string somebody along. You know what I mean? If I don't like somebody, then I might not say to them, hey, I don't like you, but I won't have much to do with them, especially if they're just being rude to me. I'll just tell them, hey, I don't like the way that you are, and I don't appreciate your behavior, and I'm out of here. And it's like, because there's no sense in stringing people along, you know what I mean? But mostly I like people. You know what I mean? I'm a person who likes people. I'm more apt to like somebody than not like them. And so it's once in a while I've run into people that I just absolutely have to say I did not like. You know what I mean? Like my grandma. Couldn't like her. I couldn't even love her, right? There's not much I can do about that. I just couldn't do it. And I mean, that's rare. I mean, I even love my parents, I mean, I even liked my mom. I mean, I liked my dad. I love them, even after what they did to me, you know what I mean? And my family. So, I mean, I like most people. You have to be pretty bad for me not to like you. And I'm definitely not the type to string somebody along. If I don't like somebody, I just tell them, hey, I don't like you. So there you go. Because, hey, people have done it to me. I've had people tell me they don't like me. So that's okay. Not everybody's going to like everybody, right? And we have to be comfortable being able to express our true feelings. And I know my sister's not good at that, because when she gets mad at me, she just shuts down. She just clamps right down. Then she waits for about 3 or 4 months after being so pissed off, and then screams about everything, and screams at the top of her lungs at me, and almost has a heart attack, causing me a lot of grief. And I'm thinking, had you just told me at the time what was wrong, we could have worked it out. But now I got to listen to this banshee woman, you know what I mean, who's 5 years older than me, screeching, and all life is over for her, you know what I mean? It's like, you give me a break. That's why people need to be honest with their feelings, and they need to talk about it, because it just builds up and the situation gets worse. Pretty soon, before you know it, it's out of hand and out of control. And I mean, I grew up like that. I refuse to live my adult life like that, right? So that's why I try to be as true and honest as I can with my feelings and express them. I don't mind expressing them for sure. And number 10 we'll pick up next time. So I'm going to go ahead and end the show now, and I have to get ready for work and everything. So have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourselves. I'll be on tonight, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time here with Elizabeth Brawley. And and then my show after that. So take care, everybody. Have a great day. If you need some more information on any kind of resources for dream catchers for abused children, please get a hold of me. Check out our website, www.dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. So happy to be, let me tell you. And, you want to learn the signs and symptoms of abuse. You want to learn all the signs and symptoms, and you want to know, because then you can you could essentially save a child's life if you know all the signs and symptoms of abuse and how to report child abuse, right? So important. So you can get that from our website or from other places right around the web. There's all kinds of great information out there on the web. And make sure that you do learn those signs and symptoms of all the different kinds of abuse, and then look out for the kids in your life. We could stop a lot of child abuse that way. If you knew the signs and symptoms, you could save a child's life. And also, do the right thing, make the phone call. And not only that, but learn how to report it properly. There's ways to report it. If you don't report it properly, it could be thrown out of court, and the child could end up back in the home, which we do see quite a bit. And then the child is generally killed because of that, right? So you want to make sure that you know how to report it. It's very simple. It's very simple, but you want to know exactly how to do it. So get the information, whether it's our website or somebody else's website. Just make sure that you do learn the signs and symptoms, get the facts, and learn how to help a child, right? So take care, everybody, and have a great day, and we'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.